We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
G'day and welcome to the Mankind Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Clift. So what happens when you bring together four men, all passionate about healing divides? Passionate about bridge building and connecting those who may be diametrically opposed on just about everything. Do you believe that's possible? Do you believe that we can actually build these bridges again and heal these divides in such a tumultuous time in history? Do you believe that someone like myself, compared to you, could be so different in our feelings, our beliefs, our ideas, our ideologies, yet we could still sit at a table together and have a great time and connect? We prove continually in our organization and in our circles that there are those that can be completely at odds on just about everything and can still connect, can still be productive, can still be effective together in an organization, in a community, in society. Yet most seem to be so fixated on really honing in on what makes us different and why I must be against you. So I wanted to bring together a group of men all passionate about healing these divides. We've got Jordan Bowman from the Journeyman Triangle. We've got Benjamin Dancer, a men's coach and educator out of Colorado, and my fellow co-host, Boyson Hodgson. And we're all going to come together and discuss things like why it's so easy to dehumanize others these days just because we disagree, and how to gain more power to drive the change that you want to see, but in a counterintuitive way, by doing your work. We talk about how our triggers are, in fact, the keys to identifying and discovering these ways to heal ourselves and our relationship with others we disagree with, as well as why it's important that if you want to build bridges, then you have to be willing to be changed by the other person who you disagree with. This isn't about finding common ground through differences. We should still be able to disagree and debate. What it is about is humanizing others, even those that we are diametrically opposed to. I believe that is necessary to healing the world as we see it today, and I believe you're going to get a ton of value out of this interview and this panel discussion with myself, Boyson Hodgson, Jordan Bowman, and Benjamin Dancer. Enjoy. G'day and welcome to another recording of the Mankind Podcast, the show where each week we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than one way to be a man. But we don't only just cover manhood, masculinity, topics around just those topics. We actually also speak to more of the macro, what's happening in the world out there. And a big part, and what I believe is important to facilitating those kinds of conversations, is having thoughtful, passionate, experienced leaders out there come and join us to share what they're learning, what they're seeing in the impactful, incredible work that they're doing. And so it's with great pleasure to have Jordan Bowman, Benjamin Dancer, and my co-host Boyson Hodgson join us today as we talk about how do we heal divides in a polarized world, along with how do we move forward together with our differences of opinion, with our cultural differences. How can we work together? I don't have the answer. I don't judge that anyone here has the absolute 12-step plan, but through courageous conversations like this, healthy conversations like this, perhaps we can give you an example of how you might be able to have these conversations in your community, around your dinner table. So checking in with a lot of joy and excitement. Grateful to be here. Boyson, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and why you're so passionate about this topic, and then we'll go around the room.
Hey, everybody, I'm Boyson. I'm stoked to be here. So I'm the old man in the room, I think, in terms of the men's work and MKP stuff. I've been sitting in a men's group and completed the New Warrior training adventure in 2004, and I've been in men's groups since then and helped form a couple of men's groups and watched the changes in the culture impact inside and outside, right? So as above, so below, as out there, so in here, with MKP. And this is it, man. This is the cutting edge. How do we connect with each other, heal together, go across these divides, lean into the discomfort of everything that's happening? And this is a great little group of guys to talk about it. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Boyson. I'll also pass it to Jordan Bowman. Mate, take it away.
Hey, everyone. Jordan here. Really excited to be here. Thanks, Boyson, for naming our intergenerational group we've got here. I think we're already bridging some divides in that way. Really excited for this conversation. I care a lot about bringing people together across difference, bridging divides, having conversations like this. It's nice to have a conversation like this that's recorded instead of just out in the backyard around the fire pit. And so excited to see what we can stir up together, what we can get into. Two passions are kind of coming together for me here. Men's work, sitting in circles. I've been sitting in circles since 2009 as a young man and as a man, and I lead circles like this for both men and women, but mostly with my role with Journeyman Triangle, which is a boys mentoring organization. I'm hosting circles where we can talk about real and deep stuff with teenage boys. And so we do that many times a month with different groups. And then I sit in circle with men through the Mankind Project as well and get my fix there. And this conversation of polarization and healing divides has been something I've been really passionate about for the last couple of years. Just seeing how do we save our democracy? How do we save the fabric of our country? And to me, coming together in a men's group in a circle like this is a part of it. And I think there's a lot more to learn, a lot more to explore. So I'm in with that. Thanks for having us. Conversation.
Grateful to have you here, brother. It's great to have you back on. For those listening at home, our previous show, Mass Off Monday, which was the precursor to this podcast. Jordan joined us there, and his episode got a ton of interest and a ton of views and a lot of attention. So grateful to have you boys back on, mate. It's not going to be the last time. So excited to have you on for perhaps a solo interview. And mate, Benjamin Dancer, thank you for joining us. This whole conversation came together because Benjamin reached out to me. He's been listening to the podcast, and I believe I'm really excited to have your lens, having been an educator for so long, having witnessed different changes throughout history, witness that through your kids that you're teaching and the kids that you've seen come through. So, mate, take a moment to tell us about yourself and we'll get started.
Yeah, I'm Benjamin. I've been a high school teacher for a very long time. And I've been given a gift where I can lead a men's group in the high school with boys. And I've been doing that for about a decade. And I also sit in a circle with MKP. I've been doing that for 3 years. And I was initiated into MKP this weekend. Woohoo. And so that just happened. And what gets me excited about this conversation is just my journey. I know that my life got better when I started taking responsibility for how I feel. And I know that when the people I'm close to take responsibility for how they feel, their lives get better. I also coach men. I have a small practice outside of my teaching duties. And I think that's the magic formula. When a man begins to take responsibility for how he feels, he heals those around him, his marriage gets better, his family is empowered, his community gets empowered. And I just think that's step one.
Step one. Phenomenal. Well, let's get stuck into it. So I've got some data, some scientific data. So we are experiencing a dramatic scene of events, extreme acts of dehumanization almost daily. We have religious centers being burnt to the ground. We're having hate-inspired massacres occurring in grocery centers, in schools, just across the country. And where some people want to try and isolate these events as single events, there's really no denying that these aren't isolated, that there is there is somehow a momentum. There's something occurring right now that is causing these instances to increase. Not only that, an NBC News poll found that 70% of the public believe we're just incapable of solving problems because we're so divided. Example could be, it's not a gun issue, it's a mental health issue, right? No, it's a gun issue, not a mental health issue. Is it a both and? Do we know? I don't know. Well, I disagree with you anyway, so I'm not even going to have this conversation. That's just one of many, many examples. So the question I want to bring to this group, and it's a big one to kick us off, how do we bridge the gap between those of differing opinions, differing thoughts, differing beliefs or value systems, different ideas of how we need to do things as a nation, as a people, but without denying our difference? I'll leave it to the circle.
Now's the time when we just do 30 minutes of silent meditation on this, right?
I know. Did everyone bring their DMT, their ayahuasca? Has everyone got their packet?
Outed himself. Benjamin, you were going to say something. Please take us in.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the evolution of this change, and so I'll just speak to that from my high school students. So I started teaching in the 90s. And in the 1990s, you could talk about these type of differences. The differences you were alluding to strike me as political in nature. You can have these discussions, and they were exciting. Kids wanted to have these discussions, and a huge difference between what happened in the 90s and what I'm experiencing today is I never heard anybody in the 90s say that an ideological opponent was evil. I never heard them dehumanize the person on the other side of the aisle. I heard disagreement, I heard anger, I heard frustration. And it seems to me that today it's normalized by the adults and the kids and the institutions, where it is okay to say that another person is evil or destroying the country or some bad motive, rather than to be curious about why there's a difference in idea.
What's coming up for me, Benjamin, is something that I heard someone say. So this isn't an original thought. It said that bridge building isn't simply about finding common ground through differences, because we should still be able to disagree and debate. We don't have to agree at the end of the day.
Yeah. If I celebrate diversity, I celebrate diversity. And I mean that in all ways. And I want to find people who have different ideas than me, because I learn from those I disagree with. I had a philosophy teacher in college who phrased it this way: we learn most from our enemy. We want to befriend our enemy. And I think what he meant was find the people who disagree with you and understand why. And that's where the growth is.
Jordan, go ahead.
Benjamin, I appreciate you kind of diving into how did we get here and looking at some of the history. I see what you're saying is true, where it's no longer we disagree and okay, what's interesting in that? What can I be curious about? But we disagree and therefore you are less human. And maybe your idea is dehumanizing me. My idea is dehumanizing you. There's this connection between ideology and identity and human worth that I think I don't know if it's inevitable, and but I do see the externalities of it. I see the negative externalities of it. Yeah, there's this concept of if we have different ideas and we want to engage in pursuit of the truth, then I'm really excited to talk with you if you have a different idea than me. Because we're pursuing something, a higher truth or a higher value. And in conversation, we might be able to arrive as something beautiful or something more true.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to kind of engage in peace building or bridge building, you have to be willing to be changed by the other person. And I think that requires a sense of humility and trust that I think is lacking. I think we think of ourselves as very important and that our ideas are right. And we don't want to approach conversations with that same humility, that same trust. We don't want to be changed because there's so much of what we believe is tied into who we are. And I definitely see that with people my age in the millennials. I'm right in between the Z and the millennials. But yeah, that's where I'll start. I wanted to echo that, share a little bit of my take on it.
Ooh, already some really powerful stuff. Self-worth, I heard from both of you. Identity factors, I heard from both of you as shifts. And then I'm going to go like way macro, right? Like growing up in the 70s, I lived in a very homogenous, information homogenous, group homogenous world. Like it was very much the same, right? So there wasn't a whole lot at risk in those conversations. It didn't feel like there was a whole lot at risk in those conversations. And I had limited access. Everyone had limited access to information, limited access to what else was going on in the world, limited access to other people's opinions, even limited access to like the violence that's occurring. Some of it's new and different. A lot of it's not new and different. Just we didn't see it. It was over there rather than in our faces over here where we could see it all the time, right? So my kids, I have teenagers. I think that fundamentally, I had some understanding of who I was in the world. I don't think kids today have that. There's a dislodgement, lack of anchor, lack of being tied to anything. And so what do we latch onto, right? There's a term in anthropology called schismogenesis. Schismogenesis is the creation of self-identity based on opposition to other identities. And I see that constantly. I am because I am against you, rather than we are because we are connected in some way. And it goes, and then back to Benjamin feeling. And I hope that's where you'll go, Benjamin. I see you.
Yeah. Well, when you said that, I want to restate what you just said, the way I interpreted it.
Yeah.
I create my identity based off of my triggers. I am no longer free.
Yes.
I'm a prisoner of my trigger of the opposition. I am not that. And I just think step one is taking responsibility for how I feel and moving right to my triggers. That's where the healing is. That's where I learned what happened to me. That's where I learned why I'm not free. And when I understand why I'm triggered and what happened to me to make me feel unsafe in this moment, when I'm curious about that, I can heal. And when I heal, I'm free. I'll say one thing about the polarization that I noticed, because I walk in both worlds. I have a lot of close people to me who are conservatives and a lot of close people to me who are liberals. And I'll tell you this, when I hear one side talk about the other, they say the exact same thing. Word for word.
Yes.
And I just wonder, like I often wonder how we can see that. And it hurts because I know they're all good people.
So I hear what you're saying, Benjamin. I agree with what you're saying. I need to do my work first before I can clearly, with awareness and eloquently communicate how perhaps these triggers influence my delivery, but I still very well may have a problem all aside with whichever external force I want to be attacking or going up against or debating.
Yeah. And I will have more power
Mhm.
in that fight if I choose to make it a fight,
Mm.
if I'm moving toward my triggers and I'm doing my work. And if I'm taking responsibility for my feelings, I will be able to show up more powerfully.
Mhm.
So what, man? What does that look like?
I go to the clearing process. My favorite thing, if I had to pick one thing about MKP, it is, man, that process is so, so powerful. And for anybody who's wondering what we're talking about right now, I I put a blog post up this morning on my website, and with the clearing process and with a narrative about the last time I went through that process is so powerful because it allows me to feel what I feel. It creates a container so that it's safe for me to experience really hard feelings. And then in that safe container, it allows me to own them and stop projecting on somebody else.
I'm happy we're taking this moment to go to the clearing. I'll quote Philip Baker, co-leader initiated in the 90s. He's 100 plus training. He's been in this stuff for a while. He loves his work with MKP, but he said if there was only one thing he would take away from MKP if he had a choice after his decades of commitment to this work, if he could walk away with one thing, he'd call it the clearing process. Of just how powerful it is. Because for those listening, we've used words like triggers, which is one of those words or phrases that's been swept up into the weaponization words. Buttons. My buttons get pushed when these things happen. These things come up. And it's all well and good, Benjamin, to say, well, it's going in and finding my triggers and how is this about me? But that oftentimes is one of the toughest journeys for people to make. So I'm excited we're going into the clearing process to kind of give people listening, whether they're involved in a circle that does something like this, or they're involved within the Mankind Project or an I group or a men's group. It is just, I'm going to shut up. Let's look at the clearing process because it has single-handedly helped me walk away from many, many mental ledges and walking out of many men's circles.
Maybe I'll just start us there by owning that anytime I'm in the clearing process, I start it wanting to get some sort of revenge or to beat up or to use it as a weapon to get at. I always begin in that space where I want to attack and project out. That can't remember a time, but that wasn't my starting point.
I agree. Oh, I'm going to get him this time.
Can I meta us? Hello, audience. Do not try this unassisted at home. We're going to be talking about a process here that is a process used in containers, that is facilitated, that is based on some very basic premises. So and I see nods in the room, right? Don't go try this. You're going to hear some stuff. Don't go try this with your spouse or partner or kids or boss, God forbid, because you're going to lose your job and hurt your relationships if you just go off.
Objective, detached, third party necessary.
Yeah, because we're starting in a place. I am starting in a place where I feel threatened because the buttons are being pushed. I have a charge.
So kick things off with ownership, knowing that this is about, if I'm going through it, it's about me. I want to get you, but really this is about me. So what does that look like?
Well, the story I wrote about that I think was really powerful for me, and I'm going to linger on it because it was like a once in a decade charge. I met a man who just made me feel unsafe. And I felt all this energy and I carried it for a day, and I called a friend who sits in my I group, and I asked him to lead me in the process because I knew something was up, and I didn't understand what. And the first thing he did after we got through that, the beginning steps that you just talked about, naming the data, he was asking me what my feelings were. And I was still projecting them at the other man. And I needed to do that, to be honest, because my feelings were intense: disgust, anger. And there is no way I could have been present I could have owned those feelings as mine. I had to put them on him for me to be honest with what was happening inside of my body. And then my judgments that the man wasn't safe, that the man was a perpetrator, that the man was a liar. These were intense judgments. And I could not have made those judgments about myself. I needed to project them outward to see them. And when my friend allowed me to see very clearly what my judgments were, feel very clearly in my body where these intense feelings were, and it was all there and ugly. He then asked me to own them. And I did not want to. I cringed, I bucked, I resisted. Like, those were that guy. I did not want that to be me.
We talk about if you spot it, you got it, to some degree. And what's interesting about the clearing process is, Benjamin, when you're sharing, I'm hearing this like, this guy is disgusting, this guy is unsafe, versus I feel disgusted by him, or I feel disgust in relationship with him, or I feel unsafe. It sounds like you were able to navigate throwing all these things out there, that raw, unfiltered, in a safe container, right? Thanks, Boyson. Where you can do that. And then you were able to pull back some of those projections and take a part of it. I'm curious, did you take back all of it?
I did.
Okay.
What happened here, this process, I've seen and done this process dozens of times. And so on the phone, outside of the circle, we did this, and we know each other well, and we're skilled at what we were doing. This took many weeks. You know, the clearing process was kind of like a bookmark for where these feelings were in my body. So I bookmarked the disgust. It was in my gut. I bookmarked the anger in my jaw and fists. And then I spent some time for several weeks with my wife unpacking, like, wow, I have these feelings. What happened to me? And over weeks, I was able to own them all and understand. I'll begin with disgust, because that was the hardest one. Really strong. Like violent, I wanted to, there's a part of me, I look at myself as a makeup of many parts. And there was a part of me that wanted to do violence. The disgust was violent. Like, I wanted to destroy and hurt, to get rid of, to eradicate. And that was pretty scary to take ownership of. And I trust my disgust. That's just a matter of faith. I learned years and years ago that when I feel disgust, usually in my belly, it's telling me that there's something dangerous or something that needs to be expelled. There's a threat, there's poison. Disgust for me is a really reliable signal that something needs to go. And it wasn't this other man that needed to go, although I felt that in the moment.
Great distinction. Yes.
I was able to find, it basically took me back to memories, things that have happened to me, burdens I carry, stories I tell myself that are poisonous to me. And through my I group, through my wife, through other close friends, through just curiosity of wondering what has happened, what is going on inside my body, I was able to really get in touch with things that have happened to me and stories that I tell myself because of those events. and unburden. And the disgust was now my ally. Let's let this out. We don't need to carry this anymore. It's in me. It's not this other man. It's in me.
What I love about the clearing, one of the many things I love about the clearing is that ability to withdraw the projection from that man. Like this man was he was holding all of that projection. You're like, he's the perpetrator. He's guilty. There's the opportunity then at the end to withdraw the projection, to perhaps identify that this person's actions, behaviors, or just even sometimes it's how they look. Man, that dude has the same nose as my dad. Or, crosses his legs the same way that my uncle did. Like it can be so seemingly big or small, depending on what the charge or the trigger or the button that's pushed. So the withdrawal of the projection, and also perhaps there is some ownership for this man. It's not about him giving you that by saying, yes, I did that thing and I'm sorry. But there is the opportunity that if you, Benjamin, are clearing with me and I am said perpetrator, I get the opportunity, even though the way the process is set up, it isn't about me. I get the opportunity to perhaps take some ownership and go, well, from your side of things, it's going to end up not being about me. But because of this process, you know what? I did.
Yeah.
I did behave in a way that perhaps isn't in alignment with my integrity and the man I want to be. So my question for you, Benjamin, and is, without naming the man, how's your relationship with this man now, or your feelings or your energy around this person, having gone through this process?
I want to say two things. I was in that man's presence recently, and I was looking for the trigger, and I couldn't find it. And I'm not saying that it won't be there tomorrow. But I did learn this, that when I'm present to a person's beauty, and man, over the weekend, I went through the NWTA over the weekend, and I'll tell you, I wept for hours, just present to the beauty of the men I was with. And when I was present to beauty, I could not find my trigger. And that was powerful. That was really powerful. And I wanted to just double back and comment on something you said and celebrate our nervous systems, Brandon. When you said that if I see a nose that reminds me of someone else's nose, or a crossed leg, that's a gift. I understand that my nervous system has memory that I'm not present to consciously. When things happen to me, it gets coded. And so that I have a really quick response time when that code presents itself in the future, that there's danger. And I think these triggers or these buttons, they're a gift from our nervous system that without, there's no way our ancestors could have survived. We had to be really, really quick around threats and dangers, and we couldn't process them with our prefrontal cortex. And there's some shadow there because that gift we were given, if we don't understand it well, we might not realize that nose that person has doesn't mean that person is bad. It just means that you're being reminded that there was a threat. This is a stimulus that reminds you of a threatening time in the past. That's why I choose, when I can, to run toward my triggers, because I want to unpack all that coding in my nervous system.
I'd love to pick up there because it just beautifully reminds me of an experience I had 2 nights ago. I was sitting in a circle, and this man across from me, a stranger to me, reminded me of someone that I was harboring a lot of feelings towards. I didn't know it. And I was sitting in a circle with this man, and he was sharing, and there was a part of my brain that was like discounting what he was saying and nitpicking it and getting upset at him. And I was like, whoa. So I had to check myself, and in a moment of self-reflection, realize, oh, this isn't about this guy, this stranger, this person I don't know yet. This is about someone from my past. And I asked the man if he'd be willing to hold a mirror for me, to be a part of that clearing process. And when I was able to share with him in community, there is this opportunity where we reflect back different aspects. We reflect back opportunities for healing. And I got into this process, and he reminded me of a friend of mine who's passed away, who overdosed. And I was angry at this man, and I was sad with this man. And part of my experience of not pushing that away, that weirdness I felt towards him, was that I was able to grow deeply in relationship with this individual and connect with this hurt, with this pain that I was feeling. And I felt support from the community. And I think this really ties into this polarization piece, because the prerequisite to some of this, to coming together, is, in my experience, at least with MKP, one of the solutions is to sit in circle with people who are invested in looking at themselves, who are invested in working on themselves, because it was in that space I could address something that otherwise would have went unsaid, unspoken to, put behind me, put in shadow. And I could have had a relationship with this individual where over years I started to find everything that was wrong with him, and not mention that it wasn't about him in the first place. It was about someone else. And so instead of letting that fester and grow, I was able to address it in the moment, because there was a safe community, because there was a process like the clearing process. I was able to get something from it. And the men sitting in the circle shared with me that it was really impactful for them.
Yeah, I couldn't have learned this if I didn't watch other men model it for me.
Great.
Someone had to make it safe before I could do it.
And then I'm rolling now, but with the teens, with the teenage boys that I work with, we teach them a version of this process.
If you're enjoying the Mankind podcast, how about taking another step? Now this one takes some courage, and you have it. Come check out the Men's Work Introduction. It's 3 sessions over 3 weeks, with new sessions starting every month, where you can join other men on the path. You can find out more about the Men's Work course in the show notes.
A lot of them, it is the first time they've experienced a circle where they can express intense emotion and move through that to figure out what's underneath.
Great.
What's that next level? And Benjamin, it sounded like you had that experience, right? You spoke to disgust and violence. How many places in our society do we have an opportunity to express that part of our experience and then move through it, to express it in a way that's safe, and to glean from it what's important? What is the story I'm telling about myself here? I think we see violence in our world because there are unclean ways of expressing that, and it's going to come out. And so grateful that there are places and spaces where people can process it in a contained way.
And how many instances of those violence is it about a man's projection? Because he's not taking responsibility for his feelings.
So here's a radical idea, and I've not gotten into trouble, but I know I've created some tension with these thoughts and ideas. We have these cases of perhaps whether it's a shooting at a school or a grocery store, and people will say, what an evil act, what an evil person. And sometimes I'll throw at them, man, I wonder what happened in their life that caused them to do something like this. And I watch people's faces just scrunch or their breath get taken away to think, how can you even defend? And I said, I'm not defending. But I love the show Mindhunter. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's about the FBI. Kind of like the 60s and 70s, they were researching and interviewing people like Ed Kemper, Charles Manson, people that were responsible for horrific acts. And they were able to identify commonalities in trauma, through trauma, in different people's stories.
Good.
And it always makes me wonder. The first thought that comes to mind is, after immense sadness and grief for the communities and the people and the families that are impacted by this, but what if those individuals were introduced to a process like this? What if there was an environment that they could have actually been able to get this stuff out? Because guess what? There was a young man at my school who will remain unnamed, who shared in our classroom that we had almost pushed him to the brink of coming in and doing something. And I was a part of that group of kids. We had almost pushed him there, and that he wasn't far off, which made it real to me that how many hurt souls, how many people who are experiencing immense chaos in their minds, in their hearts. This goes back to the dehumanization piece. So if many of these acts are acts of dehumanization, then who dehumanized them? Who made them not feel a part of something? Who created an environment, whether through nurture or nature, where they didn't feel connected?
Yeah. Without having to say whether or not there's evil in the world, that's a question I think about a lot. What do I think about this word evil? I'm not sure I'm ready to make a judgment about that, but I do have a judgment that when I hear people call people evil, I'm not sure I've heard that very many times where I thought it fit. It seemed to me like that language allows us to avoid something important. And I want to say that very carefully, because I'm not saying that things are not evil. I'm not saying that there is no evil.
Right.
I'm saying I'm concerned about the frequency with which I hear that word used.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do believe there is evil and that people become possessed by it. And we understand hurt people. I think both of those can be true.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. Not for nothing, I saw a meme on TikTok, pop culture, and somebody talking about hurt people. So there's some optimism here. There's some like hope in the fact that we have, even in pop culture today, enough people with this kind of consciousness that these things that we're talking about are starting to emerge.
Yes.
In very unexpected places. This conversation isn't just happening in small spaces like this one. I gotta bring us back out. I gotta macro us back out. There's a lot of people listening who still don't know what is a clearing process. A clearing process is a facilitated step-by-step process for examining my own stuff. And we've called it triggers. We've called it an emotional charge. We've called it a bunch of my buttons getting pushed. It can be done with the person I have that with, or without them even there. And sometimes it's really helpful to do it without whoever this person is there, because it's about me. It's about me owning my stuff. Yeah. And I want to highlight some things that have been said. It takes willingness. I have to opt into doing it. It takes facilitated safe space. And then there's this process of separation, drawing distinctions that Benjamin was talking about, right? Data, separating just what happened, your nose. Like that could be a piece of data for a clearing, and I could like go down a whole path, right? From judgments, the things that I judge about, the opinions that I have about data. You know, you're untrustworthy, you're evil, you're disgusting, you're like all those you things, all those projections, seeing those reflected in somebody else, beginning to feel the emotions that come up around them, embodied in a place, discharging. There's oftentimes some kind of emotional discharge that happens after I've looked at data and judgments, right? And then going back, who does this remind me of? And Jordan just said it beautifully, right? There's an event, there's usually a traumatic event in the past that's being brought up by what I'm seeing. And then it's owning all of those things for myself. And this isn't a one-off deal. Benjamin said this beautifully in telling his story. It's not one-off. I might deal with this today and it's back tomorrow. It might take me weeks to unpack and actually begin to own some of those projections that I've been putting out there. But so there's the big process. And here's the possibility that all of us men here are putting out in front of you, that you could have this too.
Yeah. And can I highlight one thing there, Boyson?
Yeah.
Clearing is not conflict resolution.
Thank you. Tell us more about that.
It is a precursor to conflict resolution. So if I'm going through the process, I can choose, what do I want to take back? What are the projections I want to take back? And I need to be honest with myself around what am I willing to right now pull off of this man and own as a projection. And conflict resolution is, okay, now that I've done that process, how do we find a working relationship? How do we rebuild trust? If there was an offense that needs to be addressed, there was something someone did that didn't work for me. How do I address that in community? How do we rebuild something new?
Or it's a repeat offense, and I can clear up and down all day. I could do 10 clearings and get to the same or sometimes different conclusion of the shadow or who it's about. But if the same thing is still occurring and I don't agree with it, and I'm not a fan of the impact that it's having in my organization, my relationship, then that's the conflict resolution piece.
Yeah, I want to just say something about that too. My experience is that I have internal conflict. I have parts of me that aren't okay with other parts of me. And what the clearing process does for me, it allows me to take all those parts out and put them on display, and so I can see them safely and understand what they need. And my experience is when I resolve the internal conflicts, the external conflicts tend to resolve themselves. When I'm in internal conflict, I find that I hurt the people I love. And when I use the clearing process to resolve those internal conflicts, I find that I'm able to be present with people, and I'm less triggered.
Absolutely. And this piece of repressing, I'd love to speak to, because I think in our circles we talk a lot about what we repress, ignore, and deny is the shadow, right? It sounds to you guys. So one thing that I want to highlight is, Benjamin, I'm glad you repressed your proclivity for violence in that moment.
Yeah, cool.
Right?
Yeah.
I think there's things that it's worthwhile to repress, and it's also worthwhile to have a space to think about, okay, this is up for me. This is a part of my human experience. I don't need to become possessed by it or to be taken over by it.
Cool.
But to explore it in a container and then figure out what's next.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not another common misunderstanding is it's not the actual repression of anger or rage, because you may have a lot of that. I believe we all are capable of doing extreme damage, right? Causing extreme harm. What I love about my circle is we can set up a process where I can beat the snot out of a pillow, out of, I get a chance to, in my body, express that. And it's much better that I do it on an inanimate object than anyone else out there. It's that mind. It gives me a chance to not always have to be able to mind the gap between an instance and something occur to then react immediately. It gives me that chance to, channel it elsewhere. That wild man out.
As long as I am also taking responsibility for the emotional content that's there, right? Like
Bingo.
beating a pillow over and over and over and getting
Mm-hmm.
more and more entrenched into my distorted thinking
Mm-hmm.
and distorted judgments
Mm-hmm.
about what's happening outside of me is actually damaging. It's actually unhelpful.
Mm-hmm.
That I have to do that internal ownership, that I have to, as Benjamin keeps bringing back in, I have to take full responsibility for my triggers. I have to move toward my triggers, recognizing they're mine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well said.
I'll speak something here that I've seen in MKP that I just have a question mark around, and it's the word catharsis. My wife taught me that catharsis doesn't necessarily lead to healing.
Great.
It's kind of like what Boyson just said. I might like exercise that energy and now I'm tired. But if I don't want to be stuck in the loop, the memory engram or the trauma loop, there has to be more than catharsis. And for me, that's seeing what parts of me I'm repressing and who's repressing who's afraid of whom, who's triggered by whom inside of me. And when I allow all that to come out and enter my consciousness, now I can help them negotiate. We talk about sovereignty a lot. And when I'm sovereign, I can create space for really difficult or embarrassing or shameful parts of myself and ask them what they need. And the parts that are triggered by those parts, they get in a negotiation with each other. This is what's bothering me. This is why I don't feel safe. And by letting that internal dialogue happen in a safe space, that, in my judgment, is when I've healed and I've gotten out of the loops that don't serve me.
Well, gents, I think we've had a good go at this one.
No, we missed something, and I want Jordan in here. We missed something. We haven't talked about nature.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I absolutely believe that doing this type of work outside is huge. If that's what you mean by nature.
That connection in Journeyman and in some of the work that we do in MKP, but I'm really especially thinking about like that recognition, that dawning recognition that when I clear up the stuff that's going on inside of me and I look outdoors or go out in the woods, I'm a whole different animal.
Yeah. Yeah. When we talk about dehumanizing, I think it requires us to think about what makes us human. And being in nature is when I feel most alive and most human. I feel most alive when I'm running barefoot in the woods, personally. And so when we talk about the clearing process, we talk about offering mirrors, reflecting back. One thing that I've learned over the years is that nature offers us a perfect mirror, that it reflects back to us without any distortion. Whereas humans there's distortions in the way, there's relationship, there's complexity. I believe that nature offers us a perfect reflection. And spending time in the woods, doing wilderness solos like we do with the boys, doing nature-based rites of passage work is just an amazing opportunity to begin to kind of open up, like asking yourself, who am I in a brick building versus asking yourself, who am I out in the splendor of nature? I think is a very different experience.
Wow. Well,
I have nothing wrong with buildings. I absolutely agree with progress and air conditioning, and there's something deeply rooted in our bodies and in our psyches that is to be unlocked for us to fully experience being human.
I love that.
Jordan Bowman is anti-building. See what we did there? And it's so easy.
You're a structurist.
Hey, I feel called just to make a bookend here. We began by just pointing out that there's some political polarization that seems really destructive to a lot of us. And I just want to say this. I do believe that if I'm going to have an impact, a powerful impact politically, if I have a vision politically of what I want and what I judge we need as a people, I'm going to have so much more power at achieving that if I do the work we just talked about here. When I start with me, I have so much more power the way I impact the world in a positive way.
There's a very big both and in here for me on the personal. So personal is not just personal, but there's also structural, right? There's systemic. And so, there's a part of me that says, oh, what is all this, what is all this touchy feely stuff? What is all this like personal growth stuff? That doesn't change the system.
Yep.
Right. And what I hear underneath what you're saying is like, I'm going to be ineffective at changing the systems that I see harming people in the world if I am not doing that work.
That's right.
I believe in systemic change, and I have to do my personal work in order to be effective to do it.
Hence my push to have our world leaders sit with Mother Ayahuasca. Just putting that out there.
This was not a conversation about plant medicine.
So I had to. So to round us out, I figured we could each do a checkout and kind of check out with what's my work in healing these divides. And perhaps you've already mentioned it, but my work in healing these divides is just continuing to turn up and acknowledge how my judgments and unconscious biases turn up, and how those are often my most common places to identify the stories and the charges and the triggers and the buttons that are coming up in me. So perhaps the shallow end of the pool in some cases, but it's still I got my white belt on this one. So that's me, and I'm checking out with joy to have spent this time with you, Jordan.
Yeah. Wow. There's a big storm coming in right now, and I think it speaks to a little bit of the danger and the excitement of this work. And so for me, what's mine to do in healing divides is to depolarize within.
Wow.
Where is it convenient and helpful for me to other and demonize and dehumanize and discount people's humanity or perspectives, or humanity because of their perspectives, right? It's when I make the big bad other, it usually means there's something to depolarize within. There's some inner conflict to address. So that's step one. And I think we hit on that a number of times today. The other piece is to sit in circle in community, to offer reflection to other folks, to create the space for self-awareness, and to be courageous in addressing conflict as it comes up. And then lastly is to create space for young men to do this. With the work in Journeyman, particularly, I feel called to working with young men, and specifically with working with processes like the clearing process, to give them an experience of expressing anger that leads to a healthy outcome that can be productive. It's a powerful part of my work, and I'm honored and privileged to be a steward of it. For hosting and checking out with some joy and some hope.
Beautiful, man. Jordan, I didn't know you were a poet as well. Boyson.
My work, what happened to me was not my fault. What I do about it is 100% my responsibility. And when I don't want to do that, I find myself fetishizing other people's trauma, trying to rescue people from their trauma and pain, rather than insisting for them and for myself that I know that this is 100% my responsibility. My healing is 100% my responsibility. I'm out.
Benjamin.
Wow. Those were powerful. I want to just talk about how I want to depolarize. What a great way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And this came off of the weekend, so this is fresh for me. I'll say it in two ways. One, when I'm present to beauty, I can't find triggers. Now that's hard to achieve, right? And so the way I'm working on that practically right now is that I learned that I was carrying a burden. I had coupled together three feelings that I judge I'm better served if I can differentiate between them. The first one is safety. Feel it right here in my chest. And when I'm present to the beauty of the men I was with this weekend, I just feel safe. And I coupled that with two other feelings. One is dominance, like in my shoulders, I'm going to dominate. And I judge that I will need to dominate to be safe. That's probably going to happen. And I want to be able to differentiate between those two feelings because they're not always together. And then the third feeling, I'll call it winning. I kind of feel it down in my gut, right above my belly button. It's this fear that one of us is going to lose. And I judge that there are going to be times in my life when I need to win to be safe. That's going to happen. But I want to differentiate because it's not always, winning is not always safe. Winning is not safety. Safety is safety. And I can feel those three things, and I feel like I'm in the process of decoupling them. And I hope to be a safer person in the world when I finish this work.
That infinite game versus the finite game. We're not just living in a world of winners and losers.
Yeah.
Right. We get a chance to all prosper, all win. So
you play the game in a way in which more people can play the game. That's so I understand. Can I just say, I meant to say this earlier. I want to interject and say, Benjamin, thank you for being a teacher, man.
Yes, you beat me to it, Jordan. That was in my outro.
Thank you for working with young people, for doing that. Highly needed.
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
Beautiful. And yeah, just thank you to all you men for being here, the impacts that you're having in this world. And a big thank you to our listeners that join us each and every week for another episode of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we're breaking the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than one way to be a man, and also a very clear call to action for all of you after listening to this. Perhaps you have one for yourself, but mine to you is to head to our website, find a group near you, bring these feelings, bring the chaos, uncouple this stuff with the support of others that aren't just going to create an echo chamber that reaffirms all the things that you currently believe. One thing I love about my circle is we just did the My Deeper Story process that's in the Circle of Men handbook from Bill Kauth. And we went through the whole thing of, the elevator pitch at 30 seconds. Tell us what you do. The typical beers in hand at the bar. What do you do, man? But then, and what judgments do you make based on those 30 seconds? And then the deeper story comes under. And someone in the group said, you know what's cool about this? I don't know who any of you voted for in the last election. And I relate to it's just about everything all of you said. And this is a very simple process that we do in these circles, one of countless. So my call to action to all of you listening is to head to our website, links in the show notes, find a group, find a circle, find a new warrior training so you can, just like Benjamin's just done over this past weekend, perhaps there's some healing to be done out in the wilderness for you or in an urban environment. And thank you again for joining us each and every week for this show. We're going to continue to keep turning up for you and having these courageous conversations. Lots of love. See you then. Well, there you have it, another powerful episode and discussion on the Mankind podcast. You can find out more about our guests today, Jordan Bowman and Benjamin Dancer, through the links in the show notes. We've linked to the blog that Benjamin mentions around the clearing process and healing these triggers. And we also have provided links for the Journeyman Triangle, the organization that Jordan heads, that does incredible, impactful, and powerful work with young teens and gets them into this stuff before they get too swept up and beaten around by the big bad world out there. And what I mean by that is these young men are just getting tools early in life, tools that many men will tell you that they wish they found earlier. So you're going to love Jordan's work. Give Benjamin and Jordan both a follow on social media and through their links in the show notes. If you found a lot of value in this episode, the fee is just to be able to share this with those whom you believe could benefit from the message. That's the beauty of this platform. That's the beauty of being able to have this show out there, is that it is healing the hearts of men. It is creating opportunity and opening dialogue for so many that perhaps are nervous and unsure of how to have these conversations, how to dive into perhaps these taboo or courageous conversations. So my wish and my ask is that you've found value in this, and you know there are those that you care and love about who could also find value. Just give this a share with them. And also, we don't ask often, but one of the best ways that we can get this podcast and this work out there into the world is for you to take the time to go onto iTunes and leave us a review. I'm not going to ask for the obligatory 5-star review. I want your honest opinion. If it's 4 stars, it's 4 stars. But in doing so, whatever this algorithm is and how it works, it just positions the show more. It just gets it out there. It just gets it in front of people who could really benefit from it. So that's my ask and my wish, is that you share this with those whom you believe could really benefit from it. And if you can, take the time to leave us a rating and review. It goes such a long way, and we are incredibly grateful for those who do so. Well, that's been another episode of the Mankind Podcast. I hope you've got the value out of this episode that we promised at the beginning, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Lots of love. This has been another episode of the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. We have been your hosts, Paul Newell, Boyson Hodgson, and myself, Brandon Clift, and we want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. If you want to find out more about today's guests and support them in their mission, you can find links to them in the show notes. Now, if you have found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, we are always grateful for a rating and review of the show on iTunes. Now, we've got to give special thanks to our back-end team, producer, editor, and audio ninja for the show, Michael J. Russer, and Don Huff, who takes care of our graphics and promotions and pretty much makes us look pretty. So, of course, thank you, Don. Now, above all else, we've got to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you have made it possible for us to let men all over the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if something in this episode has touched you, then perhaps it is the call to action to get involved in men's work. With live trainings happening constantly and in-person trainings happening all over the world, the Mankind Project definitely has something for you. Now, if you've enjoyed the music in this episode and all of our episodes, be sure to check out Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. And lastly, just know, what it means to me to be a man is completely different than what it means for you. What it means for Paul, what it means for Boyson, that is the beauty of this journey. So if you are looking for guidance, support, and community as you begin to unpack and dive deeper into your men's work journey, then you know where to find us. Same place, same time, next week. Lots of love. We'll see you then.